Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. I'm Hyunshim Amy Choi, the moderator of today's meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for participating in the 6th workshop on international labor migration statistics in Asia and the Pacific region, and for joining us from around the world despite time difference. Special thanks go to the heads of the representatives of COSTAT and ILO, as well as our two external consultants and the speakers of this workshop. Before the opening session, I have some housekeeping announcements. First, I cordially ask you to edit your username in Zoom according to the previously notified format. You can edit the name by clicking More button next to Mute button located next to your name under the participants list. For country participants, indicate country name followed by NSO or LM, depending on your organization, and your first and last name. For ILO staff, indicating ILO followed by first and last name will do. Detailed instructions are displayed on the screen. If you have any difficulty, please allow the secretary to help you change your username from the system. Next, I'd like to ask you to keep your audio muted when you don't use it, while keeping your video on throughout this workshop. This, in fact, should be your default setting when you enter this Zoom meeting room. So please keep this setting until you speak for this meeting. Finally, if you have questions or need help regarding participation in this workshop, please send a message to the moderator via chatting. Without further ado, I'll have the honor to invite Mr. Kwang-Sup Kim, Vice Commissioner of COSTAT, for the opening of the meeting. Mr. Kim, please.
Good morning and good evening. I'm Kwang-Sup Kim, Vice Commissioner of the Statistics Korea. First of all, let me extend my heartfelt gratitude to Rafael Diaz Medina, Director of the ILO, Dr. Evident Hoffman, and Dr. Farhad Maran, who will serve as speakers, and our dear colleagues for your attendance at the 6th workshop on international labor migration statistics. Statistics Korea has hosted the annual International Labor Migration Statistics Workshop in conjunction with the ILO since 2015. It is highly regrettable that we could only meet in these virtual settings due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 is exerting a tremendous impact on the economy of countries across the world, as well as on the daily lives of individuals. To identify changing patterns in our economies and the societies, the international statistical community is working on innovative measures in these new statistical circumstances, including the use of new data sources such as big data. International labor migration statistics is no exception. It is our responsibility that we measure the impact of entry and exit restrictions and the border closures on the labor market, and to provide the basic data needed to develop migrant worker policies. Moreover, producing international labor migration statistics absolutely requires cooperation among the Immigration Office, the Ministry of Labor, and other relevant national agencies. Therefore, I hope that we can turn this crisis into an opportunity by developing international labor migration statistics through solidarity and cooperation among domestic organizations and across countries. As you are all aware, statistics should be prepared in accordance with commonly applied standards to identify the changes from the previous period and to ensure international compatibility. I believe that this is the very reason why the ILO has adopted its guidelines on the measurement of international labor. As COSTAT fully concurs with the ILO in this respect, we have arranged this 4-day workshop to help you exchange your knowledge and experience. It is our dear hope that this year's virtual workshop will serve as a venue for all of you to engage in proactive interactions and to discover feasible solutions by taking a step forward to promote the development of statistics in the Asia and the Pacific region. Last but not least, I would like to express my thanks to those who made this event possible and to all participants. I hope that we will soon become completely free from COVID-19, and so we can see each other and exchange our greetings in person at the next workshop on international labor migration statistics. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kim, for sharing your inspiration. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Rafael Diaz de Medina, ILO Chief Statistician and Director of the Department of Statistics, to give us his welcoming remarks. Mr. Diaz de Medina, please.
Good afternoon, and good morning, and good evening. First of all, I am very happy to meet with you, and let me express my gratitude to Mr. Kwang Soo Kim, Vice Commissioner of COSTAT, for being with us today and for his enlightening opening remarks. I would like to welcome as well to you to the 6th workshop on international labor migration statistics in the Asia Pacific region. You know that this is the 6th workshop of this joint ILO and COSTAT program on labor migration statistics in the region. The first meeting took place in Doayong on the 16th to the 18th November of 2015, with many people from many countries, and there is a total in this event. We have at least more than 44 people from 18 countries, including Korea, staff and speakers. So we are very good, and we are very happy to have so many people interested in such an important topic. I would like to welcome all of you and thank all the participants for their interest in attending this meeting, and also for joining Mr. Kim in thanking all the people who has made this possible from many aspects. You know that migration and labor migration is getting more and more important for both sending and receiving countries. In these difficult times of COVID, we have all seen the different implication of the migration. Situation of migrant workers, of course, were caught in the middle of this pandemic, and there are many difficulties for workers, both for receiving and host countries. The magnitude of labor migration is increasing continuously. The ILO estimates that 164 million people are migrant workers. The previous estimation in 2015 reported that there were 150 million migrant workers, suggesting then an increase of approximately 9% to 10% for migrant workers. The ILO is currently working now in the 3rd edition of the global estimates on international migrant workers, using mainly the ILMS databases, and the results will be published by mid next year. The migration effects not only affect the life of people who migrate, but also their families, their countries, and the receiving countries as well. However, the countries are still missing and lacking of comparable harmonized data on labor migration. The first objective of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, adopted in 2019, is to collect and utilize accurate and disaggregated data as a basis for evidence-based policies. In order to address the problem and support countries in collecting comparable data, the 20th ICLS, International Conference of Labor Statisticians in 2018, endorsed the guidelines concerning statistics of international labor migration. The guidelines are being piloted in selected countries, and you will be soon informed more on the ILO's activities by my colleagues. Within the framework of the guidelines, the ILO has established a database on international labor migration and started to get inputs from the member states. This is a big achievement, but still it's only a step. In this regard, the ILO and COSTAT in 2015 signed a 5-year memorandum of understanding to support the countries in the Asia-Pacific region, to create capacity in the countries through trainings, and the MOU has been extended for another 5 years in 2019 and will be valid until 2024. We are very proud and very happy of this partnership. So far, 6 workshops were organized in which 131 professional staff participated for around 22 countries. Thank to all for your inputs and support. ILMS database, which is a unique database on labor migration statistics, is getting stronger and with your continuous support. In the coming years, ILO and COSTAT are planning to extend the project activity by supporting the implementation of the ICLS guidelines in the selected eligible countries. I would like to thank to your continued support to the ILMS and participate in the workshop at the national level. Also, I would like to thank COSTAT to be our big partner in implementing this project in the region. KSPI colleagues in facilitating the implementation of this workshop, and to my colleagues Andorina Rocco-Doranivo and Yi Yu Li, and also Haki Osel, who have been handling the ILMS database in Geneva and also the organization of many of the activities here. Thank you very much for your attention, and I am very happy to join you in opening this important workshop. I wish you a fruitful discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Diaz de Medina, for emphasizing the importance of migration statistics and the role of this meeting, with which we will conclude our opening session. Now, I would like to invite everyone to greet with each other and take a group photo. Although we're not present in the same space, we can take a group photo by capturing the full screen of everyone's video in it. Please turn on both your audio and video and join me to say hello and wave hands to the camera.
Hello.
So take your time to turn on video and camera.
Hello.
Hello.
And keep on waving your hands until I say thank you.
Hello.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Thank you for your cooperation.
Hello from
Hello.
Thank you for your cooperation. Thank you. This nicely warmed up the floor for our discussion sessions, which will consist of a presentation followed by 10-minute Q&A. Our next speaker and presenter is Mr. Mustafa Haki Ozel, Head of the Statistical Coordination and Special Topics Unit of the Department of Statistics at the ILO. Mr. Ozel will provide information for Session 2, Objectives of the Meeting, and Session 3, Recent Developments on the Measurement of International Labor Migration since the 20th International Conference of Labor Statisticians, for about 30 minutes until 8:20 Geneva time. During this presentation, you can all send me questions via chatting, and I will invite 2 or 3 participants to take the floor in the order I receive their questions. Q&A will last for 10 minutes, and any remaining questions will be addressed in our website. With that, let me invite Mr. Ozel to the floor.
Thank you very much. Meanwhile, I would like host, let me share my screen with the participants. Currently, I am disabled. And cannot share my screen.
Sure, let us know when your screen is ready.
Yes, it's ready, and I would like to share. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we see your screen. Fine.
Okay, excellent. Good morning, good afternoon, the colleagues. As Rafael mentioned, this is a series of workshops and to create capacities in the country. This is the sixth one. Mainly, I mean, we are aiming to achieve three objectives in this workshop: to update you on the recent developments on the area of labor migration statistics, what's going on globally and in the ILO. And secondly, I mean, to increase the efficiency of our communication with you, because I mean, you are our ambassadors in your country, and through you, we are managing to get data, secondary data on labor migration statistics from different agencies in your country. And also, we would like to hear from you during this workshop about the challenges that you are facing in providing data with us. Because you know better than we do. We are preparing the questionnaires, which will be presented to my colleagues during this workshop. But we would like to hear from you. If you are facing any challenges in filling the questionnaire, if yes, what are the challenges and how we can improve our methods and communications, especially. Communications, because we have different types of colleagues participating in these workshops since 2015. Naturally, we understand that our focal points are changing in the countries. We would like to keep our network as wide as possible. For this, we need your support. And the third objective is to identify, as Rafael mentioned in his opening remarks, in the region with the support of COSTAT and ILO would like to identify the willing countries which are eligible to implement the guidelines in their countries. The details of this guidelines and the methodology will be presented to you and mentioned in detail in the session 3 and session 9. And as you might have noticed in session 10, we are going to discuss the possibility of implementation in these countries. So right now, I may ask the colleagues, think about this, discuss this possibility with your colleagues, so that when we reach to session 9 and 10, we will have communication with you, because there we would like to have a tour de table. I mean, we would like to go around the table and get your feedback on this. So this is the main objectives of this workshop. Now let me go to start the session 3. Yeah. This is the first objective, one of the first objectives of this workshop, which aims to brief you what's going on in the area of international labor migration statistics since the endorsement of the 20th endorsement of the guidelines concerning statistics of international labor migration by the conference in 2018. Here, I would like to cover 3 subjects in this presentation. And I have 14 slides to share with you, excluding the titles and the content page. And I'll try to finish by 8:20 in half an hour, basically, even less than half an hour, so that we'll have time for responding, clarifying some of the queries, issues that you may wish to raise. Concerning the updates on the development of international migration statistics globally, of course, the most important things is the revision of the UN 1998 recommendations. As you know, the UN recommendations initially was launched in 1953 and then revised in 1976, and the current version was revised in 1998. The aim is to improve international migration statistics. The recommendation, UN 1998 recommendations, provides guidance on how to collect statistics on migrant stock and flows relevant to study of international migration. It reviews major type of data sources for international migration statistics, as well as ways to integrate them through the use of framework for data reporting. According to the 1998 UN recommendation, an international migrant is defined that as any person who changed his or her country of usual residence. And in fact, so basically, it can be defined as a factual change of country of usual residence. However, in this recommendation, there's no reference in terms of this definition, using the usual residence definition. There's no reference to the country of birth, country of citizenship, permission for legal stay, or reasons of change of country. Almost 20 years or more than 20 years passed since the adoption or releasing this UN recommendation. And since then, many things have changed. First of all, the magnitude of international migrants have increased, and it brought the complexity of international migrants. The reasons have changed, and there are mass flow of people from one country to another for different reasons, and also how countries are measuring the phenomena has also changed. And also there are new data collection methodologies such as big data. But importantly, there are new developments in the methodologies and international standards, mainly the ILO's guidelines concerning the statistics of international labor migration endorsed by the 20th ICLS in Geneva in 1918. And also another one is the statistics recommendation on statistics of refugees. So these are important developments which urge UN to go through the existing UN recommendation and revise the recommendations. In 2019, UN established an expert group on international migration statistics. And the experts came together in New York in 2018 and discussed the possibilities. At the end, they agreed to revise and write a new manual, which may include these 5 sections. The first one, data and indicators on international migration, which talks about access data needs to address the relevant migration issues. And the second one is the concepts and definitions. The chapter will include the conceptual framework of migration relevant concepts and will provide statistical definitions for these concepts. And ILO is also actively part of this second chapter. By the way, the expert group created separate task forces for each of this section. So there are task forces working on each of this section separately, and ILO is a member of the task force for the chapter 2 on key concepts and definitions related to international migration. And the third chapter, it talks about the data integration. Fourth one is will analyze the best practices globally and report in the new report. And the fifth one will talk about the global program on migration, which will investigate more how to support countries to improve the implementation of this updated guidelines. So what is new in this area, in this work of UN expert group on updating the current recommendations? To be honest with you, out of this fifth group, the most active one was the Task Force 2. So in the Task Force 2, the experts came together several times, discussed the issues, and the draft report has been prepared, which will be submitted to the expert group by the task force, the group of task force, to discuss in the in the group of expert meeting. And then the plan is to submit the report of the all expert group meeting to the March 2021 United Nations Statistical Commission. So in this report of the Task Force 2, the concept was broadened by bringing the concepts of international mobility. The international mobility includes all movements that cross international borders within a given year. Whereas international migration is defined as narrowly as a change in the country of residence and is considered as a subset of international mobility. In this conceptual framework, population and their corresponding international mobility were separated into two distinct groups. The first one is resident population and international migration, and the second group is temporary population and international temporary population mobility. International temporary mobility population, international temporary population mobility includes all international border crossing, except those related to change in their resident population. As you have seen, I put question marks here next to the temporary because ILO has some reservation on this terminology. I will explain you. This slide explains the definition of resident population. In fact, there is no change in the definition of resident population, even despite the fact that I put here the terminology as resident population. Currently, in the new version of the report of the task force, it will be defined as usual resident population. Usual resident population, this concept is very important for any statistical offices to define their target population in different surveys. So it's very important, and it's important concept for population census as well. However, when it comes to the measurement of labor migration, then this is problematic. Why? Because the concept of usual residence, despite the fact that it's important, but it is not sufficient to define labor migration. So that's the whole issue which was discussed throughout the meeting of Task Force 2. In terms of the measurement of labor migration in the UN work, there is not much change in the definition, in the concepts of usual resident population, but the new element, as I mentioned, is the international mobility. This is the new part, which includes non-usual residents of a country as well. I said ILO has reservation on the temporary population. As it was defined in the UN Task Force 2 report, draft report, temporary population refers to all persons present in the country at a specific point in time who are not residents. We, as ILO, say that the term temporary is not appropriate and not necessary, because the existence of a great number of workers who cross borders every day to work in neighboring country, they are not, these people are not temporary. Let me give you an example from Switzerland. Switzerland, especially in Geneva, surrounded by France territory, in the hospitals, almost majority of the nurses are French people. But these French nurses are not residing in Switzerland. They are residing in France, in the neighborhood of Geneva, and they are daily commuting to Geneva. They work there and they go back to home for years. Well, that's the, I mean, we cannot say these people are temporary. They are, they have been engaged in this work more than years. So that's why we proposed, instead of using the term temporary, we proposed the terms such as non-resident population present in the country, non-resident foreign population, or simply using non-resident population. But apparently the group, the UN especially, did not agree with this, and most likely they will be continuing using the term temporary. The problem, to be honest with you, I understand their point, because they are all, the demographs mainly, and they are taking the issue from the point of view of demography rather than labor. So this is actually something new has happened since the launching the UN recommendation in 1998. So this needs to be somehow brought into the table, and this will be done by the ILO, which I will mention, the group work, my working group, which was established by the ILO and will be working on this issue from the labor migration point of view. So in this section, I will briefly mention about the ILO's work, what ILO is doing after the endorsement of the guidelines on the measurement of international labor migration. As you know, the guidelines concerning statistics of international labor migration recognize three concepts of international labor migration, namely international migrant workers, for-work international migrants, and return international migrant workers without excluding others. These three concepts are recognized, and for them there are definitions, and also the indicators have been listed, relevant indicators listed in the guidelines. However, when it comes to D, which is in red here, you see, it talks about citizens and native-born persons working abroad. This has not been clearly defined. However, the paragraph 59 of the guidelines dealing to future work of the future actions calls the ILO working on all these three concepts, and including this D, because also there is another separate paragraph 15 in the guidelines which specifically refers this group, citizens or native-born persons working abroad. ILO acknowledged the importance of this concepts and will be is working on this concepts as well. So in line the mandate given by the paragraph 19 of the guidelines, ILO is working on the development of methodologies for these concepts. This is the response of the ILO, because ILO has developed a detailed strategy and also including an implementation table to address the issues, the requests stipulated in the paragraph 59 of the guidelines. This strategy leads the work of the ILO towards the drafting a resolution along with the technical background paper, and this paper and draft resolution will be presented to the next ICLS. And the strategy basically involves this 5 steps listed here to review the national sources and country practices concerning international labor migration and develop viable methodologies for each of the main and subcategories of ILM that I mentioned in the previous slides, and discuss these outcomes with a working group of experts and conduct studies in the countries to test the agreed methodologies, and then report to the results to the next ICLS, which is 21st International Conference of Labor Statisticians. The strategy, this is the overall framework of the strategy. This is, in fact, is a summary of ILO's summary of piloting activities in each country. So if we agree to conduct this survey, this guidelines in Philippines, and we will be doing this activities, what we are going to do, we will review the existing data sources on each element of international labor migration. Each element means, international migrant workers, for-work international migrants, return international migrant workers, and nationals or citizens working abroad. So these are basically the elements, main elements of the international labor migration. And study the existing data, use this data, and if there is any lack of the gap, if there's any gap, and then try to develop methodology to fill the gaps. The beauty of this is this, as follows. One of the main problem of this international labor migration statistics in the countries, each organization has its own definition and its own database, and they don't speak each other. If I recall correctly, it was in Hungary, I suppose. I heard in one of the conference, they have 19 separate database on labor, on migration, and they don't speak each other, this 19 database. So beauty of this approach, we are using all existing data and try to reconcile this. Currently, we hear the countries are complaining that the administrative data is not being used as it should be, which is correct. And in this approach, we are using both administrative records and also surveys and censuses as well. So it gives you a broad picture of the situation and to try to reconcile and identify gaps and then develop methodologies for these identified gaps. So this is the beauty of the strategy that is currently being implemented in the selected countries. In this grid, the data sources and the elements of international labor and migration were crossed, and eligible countries for each study was identified when we developed this strategy document. However, of course, this list, developed on the table and based on the progress and communication with countries, and also the results of the session 10 we will have during this workshop, we will expand this list, list of countries here in this grid. So currently, this strategy is being implemented in Turkey, Korea, Switzerland, and Philippines. So hopefully there will be more from the Asia Pacific countries in this list as well. I had also other activities which is going on. IADO's one of the major activity in the region is the Memory of Understanding, as Rafael mentioned in his opening remarks, was launched in 2015 and extended in 2019 for another 5 years. Before having this joint activity, we were very weak in the region, and we had difficulty in getting data from many countries, especially in the Asia Pacific region, despite the fact that there are lots of data sources on migration. So with this, with the help of this joint project, we managed to increase the number of indicators in the International Labor Migration Database, thanks to this joint project. So far as it was indicated, we have, including this one, we are having 6 workshops successfully will be completed. And so far, our relation with the countries was limited with the data collecting activities. However, as of next year, in agreement, of course, with the COSTAT, we would like to expand our activities by implementing guidelines in selected countries in the region as well, to create capacity and increase the implementation of standards in the region. Another activity, ILO's activity, is the training, international training, which will be held in November. And this is the link for you to look at and register if you are interested. The objectives of this e-learning course on measuring and analyzing labor migration is to increase the capacity of national and international stakeholders to better measure and analyze labor migration and produce timely and high quality migration statistics based on international standards. So you see here are the topics to be covered. Basically, you will be briefly informed about the international setup of statistics and international standards on labor migration. And then you will be briefed about the possible methodologies that can be used for sampling international migrant population, because this is one of the major difficulties in measuring the labor migration through the surveys and research. So ILO has been working on this measuring of LSU population for years and developed and published as a dedicated publication thanks to Vijay Verma and Farhat Mehran. They were the leading, the authors of this great publication. And this will be presented during the workshop. The selected methodologies, relevant methodologies will be presented. And also the participants will be briefed about the results and outcomes of the global estimates. You know, ILO so far published 2 global estimates, and now we are working on the third edition of the global estimates. You will be briefed about the methodology of the previous estimates and then improvements that is being used in the third global estimates of international migrant workers. And you will be briefed also, the participants will be briefed about the ILO's labor migration database, how it's designed, what is the mechanism that is being used. And it's a robust database, especially when we communicate with you. We are trying to assure the consistency and quality of the data that is being shared through the ILMS database. And also you will be briefed about administrative sources that can be used for international migration statistics. And also there is another surveys on measurement of recruitment costs. ILO, with collaboration with the World Bank, develop a methodology to measure the recruitment costs. This will be also presented to you. And ILO established a working group. I will finish soon. ILO has set up a working group upon the mandate given by the resolution concerning further work on labor migration statistics adopted in 19 ICLS in 2008. So then the group was created in 2015. It is intended to provide guidance by agreed international standards, concept definitions, and foster the exchange of experience among compilers. Basically, so far group met 3 times. The first one was in Istanbul in 2015, and then in turns in Turin 2016, and again in Turin 2018. And based on the feedback from these 3 meetings, ILO developed this guidelines and adopted this in this 20th ICLS in 2019. Now, we are having this fourth meeting in November in the next month, and in which there will be a paper prepared by Farhat Mahran will be presented. And the report will basically includes this topics. The first one, the main concepts and definition of international labor migration articulated in the guidelines will be reviewed, and certain improvements will be suggested. And the second subject is the statistics of stocks and flows in light of the numerical illustration. This will be discussed, and number of modifications in the text of guidelines will be proposed for discussion. And the third topic is the main data sources on labor migration. This will be reviewed, and a framework for combining data from different sources will be described. And also several measurement issues also will be examined, and methodologies will be proposed for oversampling and target sampling of international migrant workers and returned international migrant workers in the context of household surveys. Of course, the ultimate goals of this group of working meetings is to develop a draft resolution for discussion and a possible adoption at the 21st ICLS, envisaged to be held in 2023. So the colleagues, this is my presentation, and thank you for your patience and attention. That's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ozol, for nicely summarizing recent developments in statistical works for the international labor migration statistics. I received 2 questions so far from COSTAT and from Kyrgyzstan. So let me first give the floor to Nurlan Tinaliev from Kyrgyzstan to ask the question to the speaker. I remind you to unmute your audio before you speak. Nurlan Tinaliev from Kyrgyzstan, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. Hello, dear participants. Thanks for organizers for this presentation conference. My pleasure to see you here, all of. My question is, how, just a moment.
Mr.
What is the purpose of this presentation, and how can we
Mr. Nurlan, I don't see your video, so if you can you please turn on your video and continue asking the question? Thank you.
Sorry, I have technical problems. I cannot connect to my video.
Okay, if you can't,
I think I read the question. Mr. Nurlan, your questions, you say, what is the purpose of this conference, right? Is this your question?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, the conference, you are referring to this workshop, or could you kindly clarify what do you mean? The purpose of this conference, this workshop, or the ICLS, International Conference of Labor Statisticians? Which one are you referring to? or are you referring to the implementation of the guidelines in the countries? No answer.
We have actually
Well,
another question
Yes.
from Mr. Rath of India. So can we answer that question and come back to this previous question to Mr. Nerlin, please? So if that's okay, okay, Rath from India can take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank that the previous presentation was really well articulated and nicely presented. That was quite informative. But I have a couple of doubts, you can say, maybe someone can clarify. There are two types of countries. One is sending country and another is receiving country. So my query is exactly how this migration database is going to help the sending countries. And secondly, is that there are many differences across countries so far as the definition of migration is concerned. And particularly the term usual residence, what I saw in the presentation, there are differences in the definition of usual residences while collecting the data itself. So how this issue is tackled in this database and in this process? That's these two are my basic questions.
Yeah. Well, Ms. Rath, thank you very much raising these interesting questions. Let me start from your last question. How you are referring to discrepancies, the definition of definitions that are used by the countries in defining migrants and labor migration. This is exactly we want to really resolve this issue. And in the past, we were collecting the, you're right, there is no unique definition even within the countries. That's why for the database, we have brought in the light of this ICLS guidelines, we brought two concepts to eliminate, to reduce, not to eliminate, we cannot eliminate 100%, to reduce discrepancy between the definitions of this concept. We introduced concepts of, we brought to the database the concepts of country of birth and country of citizenship. So these are the same for all countries. We are using these two concepts in collecting data. So of course, there will be still, differences in terms of coverage of the target population in the countries. But at least conceptually, we are clear what we are talking about. When it comes to the definition of international migration, yes, you're right. This is the concept of usual definition is not unique. And there is many problems. And this is one of the difficulties that are faced by the countries in collecting data and implementing the UN 1998 recommendations. And as you see, the usual residents are not unique. There are different ways of measurement, and this is problematic. I fully agree with this. But in the concepts of labor migration, we are trying to reduce the discrepancy to the extent possible. In terms of how sending countries can get benefit from this, I think this is first, they will be aware. I think one important contribution of this database, this effort, first, we are creating or trying to create network even within the countries. More than network, actually putting in touch the relevant people together and make them aware the differences in each organization in terms of measurement of phenomena. And this is, at least to my experience, wherever I was, and discuss these issues, when we get together with the relevant agencies, they have realized differences which we're not aware fully. So this is one. Second thing, of course, there are, our database is on, there are a certain number of indicators which will be presented by our colleagues, and we'll have more opportunity to see what are available in the database and how we can improve and how this can be used. How the sending countries or receiving countries can get benefit by providing the data and, of course, using the data. For example, for the time being, before the ILO's work, nobody knew how many international migrant workers that there are around the world. Now, sending countries are aware of the size of the phenomena, but also it depends, the input obtained from country. For example, from India, it's a huge country and it has big impact ILO's work. So if we have more data from India, we would appreciate to improve our database and number of indicators as well. Thank you very much.
Due to the time constraint, we will conclude session 3 here. And I'd like to thank everyone for their participation, and special thanks to Mr. Ozol for his contribution. In the next session 4, we will discuss the ILO's policy framework on international labor migration statistics and its application in the context of COVID-19. Ms. Natalia Popova, Senior Economist from the Conditions of Work and Equality Department at the ILO, will give a presentation on the topic for the next 50 minutes until 9:20 Geneva time, followed by 10 minutes Q&A. During her presentation, you can send questions to the moderator via chatting, and you will be invited to take the floor and ask the question yourself at the end of the presentation. With that, let me invite Ms. Popova to take the floor.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
So I will share now my screen. Okay. So basically, my presentation today will be an introduction on labor migration statistics, but mostly from the user's point of view. So I think the rest of my colleagues are going to be giving you very technical presentations linked to the use of labor migration statistics, the different methodologies that are out there. I mean, my colleague Haki just spoke about our database. So my presentation is going to try to present a different point of view when it comes to labor migration statistics. And as I said, the user point of view in this conference. So we know that labor migration is a very complex phenomenon. I mean, the ILO global estimates on labor migration indicate that this is a growing phenomenon. Currently, we have 164 million migrant workers around the world. There are various reasons for the increase in labor migration flows. These are demographic trends, globalization, climate change, technological innovations. I mean, they all play important role when it comes to labor migration. Now, I think already my colleague indicated some of the challenges when it comes to labor migration statistics. But let's first start with why collecting labor migration statistics is indeed important. And actually, compared to other areas covered by the ILO, I mean, the area of labor migration statistics is indeed one of the most challenging ones. So first of all, labor migration policies, we say they should be evidence-based. However, the situation that we face in many parts around the world, and here I'm talking not only of origin, but also of destination countries, is that labor migration policies are often designed without having strong evidence base, and they're really not focused on, let's say, labor market issues, skill needs and gaps, but often they are designed with, let's say, security issues in mind. I mean, this is not to say that this is wrong, but still the lack of strong evidence in this area, let's say, creates a lot of challenges when it comes to the design of effective policies. Of course, the need of strong evidence also comes when we, let's say, design specific instruments or specific agreements between countries for the improvement of labor migration, which could, let's say, on one hand, allow the protection of migrant workers' rights, which is very important for the ILO, it's in the core of our mandate, but also at the same time could respond to labor market needs in destination countries. Nowadays, I mean, the moment you turn on the news, the chance that you're going to hear about labor migration issues is very high. So it is a very polarized topic, let's put it this way, to talk about labor migration. So actually, the need for strong evidence could also help fight issues such as xenophobia, racism, and stereotyping migrant workers. And last but not least, also having a strong evidence base could help coordinate labor migration policies, which are often, let's say, designed in isolation with other related policy domains, such as education and training. I mean, when it comes to the skills of migrant workers, employment policies, trade and development policies. So in order to have, let's say, effective and efficient policy approaches in this area, the strong evidence is really key. Now, what are the main sources of labor migration statistics? And of course, later on, I mean, my colleagues are going to go into details talking about these different sources. So here in my presentation, I'm just going to mention them and what are the main sources. I mean, first, we have population censuses, which is, let's say, one of the traditional sources. However, still not all population censuses cover migration issues. Then we have household surveys, and in particular labor force surveys. And the ILO has designed a specific migration module to be implemented with labor force surveys, which could provide, let's say, important indications on the state of labor migration. It is applicable both in origin and destination countries, of course. Now, what is interesting about this module is that it is very flexible. So the questions could be modified depending on the specific country needs and the specific aspect of labor migration that could be studied. In some countries where we have applied the module, for example, in Moldova and Ukraine in 2013, it was extremely detailed. So we were able to really have a very comprehensive picture of labor migration. We look at potential migrants, but we also look at return migrants, at their socio-demographic characteristics, and also at the labor migration history, which was very important. In other countries, the module has been very brief. I mean, 1 to 2 questions. For example, in South Africa, most recently it was implemented. I will stop here. Again, I mean, my colleagues are going to provide you more details, but let's say this is one of the ways in which the ILO has been providing technical assistance to countries in order to collect data on labor migration. Also, I want to mention administrative records. I mean, there will be a special intervention, I know, later on. I mean, administrative records are becoming an increasingly important source of information, but at the same time, it remains very much an untapped source. Why it is becoming an important source? I mean, also with the increasing use of technology in our life, I mean, in the future, perhaps this is going to be one of the most important sources for labor market data. The challenge with administrative sources so far has been that very often they're not user-friendly, and let's say that the information is not presented in a way that policymakers could easily use it. And also they use different definitions. So let's say there is a need to better coordinate data coming from household surveys and those coming from administrative records. So let's say this is an area where the ILO is currently investing a lot of resources. Now, here I have included a list of possible data sources when it comes to information for migration outflows, inflows, and also information for stocks. I mean, so far, the ILO global estimates, both, I mean, at the world level, but also regional level, they were all stock figures. But the information on inflows and outflows is, I mean, key in order to understand the dynamics of labor migration. Again, here, I mean, household surveys remain a very important source of information, as well as I mentioned, various administrative sources. I mean, a lot of the information on FOS is based on issue of work permits, or issue of immigration visas. Of course, here the challenge is that this only covers part of the migration flows. I mean, those migrants who go abroad in regular circumstances. However, we know that actually a large number of migrant workers go through irregular channels, and those, of course, are very difficult to capture. Another important source of information are recruitment agencies. I mean, this is also an area where the ILO has been investing a lot of resources. The issue of fair recruitment and how recruitment agencies are licensed, are regulated so that they could, let's say, participate, I mean, in labor migration, but on clear terms and conditions. So, I mean, actually having information on coming from them in the future could be potentially an important source. Now, here I have, let's say, presented the point of view of origin countries and destination countries and what kind of data needs are important. I mean, in a sense, some of the data needs are very similar when it comes to the socioeconomic profiles of migrant workers. I mean, countries of origin are interested to know how many people are going abroad and what are their skill levels. On the receiving side, destination countries want to know how many migrant workers are arriving and what are their skill profiles so they could match to their labor market needs. For example, one issue that origin countries are particularly interested in are remittances, because they are an important source of income, and also they could have an important contribution to the development of origin countries. while destination countries are also often preoccupied about the number of irregular migrant workers coming to their labor markets. And here, of course, there are a lot of challenges, as we said, to measure this phenomenon. Origin countries are also very much interested in return migration, because return migrants bring back new skills, capital, social networks, which could help develop the origin countries. But also, I think in the current COVID context, return migration has become an important phenomenon, because a lot of migrant workers lost their jobs in the epidemic, so they were forced to go back home. So actually, having tools to measure return migrations is really key when it comes to developing policies for labor market reintegration. And this is really an untapped area. I mean, the ILO now is starting to work more on this issue and to come up with concepts and definitions of how to measure this phenomena, but indeed it is very important. And from the destination country point of view, I would like to mention the issue of actually social protection and also integration policies, labor market integration policies as well. So also having data on the social protection coverage of migrant workers, and let's say those who have participated in integration programs, is also, let's say, an important policy planning tool for countries of destination in order to know how to, let's say, improve both the social protection coverage, but also the active labor market policies in order to be able to integrate more effectively migrant workers in their labor markets. Now, actually here on this slide, I have presented the information that you already discussed, but in a more visual way. And what I try to do is to link labor migration statistics and the different needs for labor migration statistics to the labor migration policy cycle. Because at the different stages of the labor migration policy cycle, it could be that the different data needs which arise. So first, I have presented the situation of origin countries. So at the stage of policy design, what is important to have is information on overseas markets and demands for workers by sectors, occupations, and skill levels. So this is key in order to design both specific policies or design bilateral or multilateral labor migration agreements under which migrant workers would be able to go abroad. Now, during the process of implementation of labor migration policies, from the origin country point of view, what is important is the information about the nationals who have gone abroad. There is a need for information on the numbers of migrant workers who are going back. I mean, we already said that return migration is very important for origin countries. Also, it is important to know how many of the return migrants are planning to re-immigrate or are actually re-immigrating. I mean, this is also an important factor when it comes to designing migration policies. And last and not least, also information about the diaspora engagement, because again, when it comes to linking labor migration and development issues, the involvement of those migrants who have gone abroad and who have, let's say, established successfully abroad could help then develop the development of their countries back home. Then we have the stage of monitoring and evaluation. And here, usually what is important is to look at the impact of labor migration policies on the local labor market. And there could be, of course, different impacts here. There could be an economic impact. There could be also social impact. What we see is that when migrant workers go abroad, this could create skill shortages and skill gaps on the local labor market. And very often in this discussion, we talk about high-skilled migrant workers, and we discuss the issue of brain drain, but actually skills at all levels could be important, and that could create gaps and shortages as a result of migration. So actually this is a very important indication to understand what is the impact of these policies, because it is not only in the realm of labor migration, but this has important ramifications for other policies, for economic development, for planning education and training policies, for designing employment policies. And I have to say that this is an area which is very much untapped. I mean, there are really very few examples that we can refer to actually successful evaluation of labor migration policies, or let's say putting in place effective tools for their monitoring. And the last part of here my circle is actually the revision and the design of new policies, and it is very much linked to the previous stage of policy evaluation. So it is, as I said, important that policies are evaluated and the results are fed into the next policy cycle. Again, I think when it comes to labor migration, this is rather challenging. I mean, there are few examples of such monitoring and evaluation being conducted. I mean, there could be different reasons. Of course, one is lack of evidence, but also very often labor migration policies are not seen as a separate policy domains. So they're seen as part of other policies, foreign affairs, interior, and so forth and so on. But still, the fact that there is lack of data in this area is a very important conditioning factor for lack of successful monitoring and impact assessment. Now, I have designed the same slide, but from the destination country point of view. And here at the level of policy design, what is important to understand is the need for migrant labor and what kind of skills, in what kind of economic sectors, and for which occupation there is demand. And I have to say that even in countries which have been traditional receiving countries of migrant labor, this is still very challenging. And this information is not really collected in a systematic way. Then when it comes to the phase of implementation, here usually what is important is to understand, on one hand, the number of the migrant workers, but also under what arrangements they have been admitted to the country of destination. Why? Because we know that country of destination are very concerned about irregular migration. It's a phenomenon which is difficult to measure and often difficult to control. So let's say that's why at this stage, it is important to have also an understanding of the number of migrant workers using different channels to, or different programs to go abroad. Evaluation and monitoring. I mean, here I have to say that the challenges that I mentioned for destination countries often apply to the changes that I mentioned in origin countries often apply also to destination countries. When it comes to having the possibility of continuous monitoring, I mean, the situation varies, but also destination countries varies a lot in terms of their capacity to collect data and monitor labor migration policies. Here also what is important is to have information on labor market integration, on conditions of work of migrant workers, and of course, what is the impact of labor migration on the local labor market in terms of wages, in terms of working conditions. And of course, in the last phase, all this information that we have collected in the previous 3 phases should help us design better policies. The ILO has been promoted the establishment of labor market information and migration systems, meaning that having a coherent approach when it comes to labor market and migration data. Well, the situation, of course, varies very much, but I think what we need to know is also it is very difficult nowadays to classify countries only as an origin country or only as a destination country. Many countries are both origin, destination, and transit countries at the same time, which also, I think, complicates further the data collection exercise. So what are the challenges associated with migration information? I mean, I have put what are the main issues, but I think I will focus on some of them, which, let's say, are of particular interest to the work that the ILO is doing. And I think this is when it comes to comparability and access and transparency to data. I mean, the ILO has done a lot of work in terms of coming up with comparable concepts and definitions which are internationally accepted. I mean, already there were colleagues who raised the issue that different countries use different definitions, which makes the data difficult to compare. So this is an area where the ILO has invested a lot of work, and this is was mentioned also by Haki, that the last International Conference of Labor Statisticians came up with guidelines on labor migration statistics, precisely focusing on concept definitions and methods. Another very challenging area is the issue of coverage. If you look at the global estimates that the ILO issues, I mean, in the last global estimates, we were able to have age breakdown, but what remains still very challenging is to have a breakdown by economic sectors. And so far, we have still not managed to have migrant workers by level of skill, which is key. Now, what are the gaps in migration information? And of course, here I have included an indicative list. I mean, by no means this list is exhaustive. I have put some areas which, let's say, are critical, but we lack statistical information. I mean, the first one is on irregular migration, and I already mentioned this in my presentation, that this is really an area where there is still a lot of work to be done. Then data on trafficked and smuggled persons. I mean, here the challenge is that we still need to have international definitions in these areas, and also a lot of the data which comes from is compiled from police reports or comes from NGOs. So how this information could be systematized and be comparable and accurate. Then migrant workers' contribution to receiving countries' economies. I mean, this is a very important issue because, as you know, there are heated debates in many destination countries on the role and contribution of migrant workers. So if we want to have informed policies, but also informed public opinions, this area is really key. I mean, the ILO has done some innovative work recently, looking at developing countries as destination countries and what is the migrant contribution. So this, as I said, has been an innovative work from the methodological point of view. But also what is important here is when we talk about their contribution, I mean, we should cover all skills levels. Usually the contribution is seen only by highly skilled workers, but I mean, low and medium skilled workers are equally important when it comes to contributing to the economy. And this is an area which has not been measured so far. And also, I think it's very important to know more when it comes to issues related to wages and to social protection. What is the contribution of migrant workers? And again, this is really an untapped area. Another area which we lack information is about working conditions of migrant workers in terms of wages, hours, occupational safety and health. Then there are categories of migrant workers, and here I have used the example of domestic workers, but there are also other types of workers. For example, another category which comes to my mind is seasonal workers, that in some countries, they're really not covered by the labor legislation. So basically, these are invisible migrant groups on the labor market. So then how do we measure them? And the ILO has come up with definitions, and we had global and regional estimates on the number of migrant domestic workers some years ago. I already spoke about the issue of measuring skills, and when it comes to migration, that this has been very challenging, and related to this is also the issue of brain drain and brain gain, that it's for the moment, it really remains an area which has not been, has not been covered. Return and circular migration is another area. Remittances, I think here the situation is a little bit different, because I think at the international level already we have quite good databases in this area, but it is more data on patterns and use of remittances which is lacking. And the last point is about diaspora. In terms of numbers, location, and contribution, we said actually having diaspora policies is very important for origin countries, because it will help them with their development, and maintaining strong diaspora networks is definitely key. And you could see that also there is an increasing trend of including diasporas when it comes to developing labor migration policies. Now, let's look briefly at the use of existing data and what are the challenges. I mean, when it comes specifically to labor migration data, the problem is that there are many different agencies involved. And also the issue is related to the fact that labor migration is sometimes seen as part of the responsibility of the Ministry of Labor. Sometimes it is under the Ministry of Employment, and other times it's under the Ministry of Interior. So this already complicates the situation. Then the communication between the users and producers of data could be difficult, and often when especially comes to administrative sources, and I mentioned this, the challenge is that even though there are potentially a lot of data which are being produced, I mean, they are produced in a format which is very difficult for the user to understand and use for policy development purposes. Of course, there is capacity issue, and this could be both financial and human capacity. And there are, of course, issues related to access and transparency as well. In the past, I mean, the ILO, in the framework of providing technical assistance on labor migration statistics, we have tried to work both with the users and producers at the same time, and in a given country to try to look at the different data sources. I mean, here to my mind comes the work that we did in Moldova a couple of years ago, also together with other international organizations, in order to have a coordinated approach and map the different data sources and provide recommendations of how this could be done in a more user-friendly way for policymakers. I think the challenge is that you cannot do this just one time. This should be a continuous effort. So I think, again, I mean, this is an area where technical assistance would continue to be an important issue. So what is the need for better labor migration statistics? I mean, this is already, I mean, we spoke a lot about these issues, but let me reiterate that actually having international standards and definitions and common methodologies is really key. And I mean, this is, I think, at the heart of the work of the ILO. And also, perhaps you heard this morning already, there is also work going on at the UN level in order to revise the existing definition of international migration and international migrant. Of course, the improvement of the capacity of national statistical offices is key. And I think what is becoming increasingly important is the need to improve the coordination and harmonization between multiple data sources, both at national, regional, and global levels. Now, let me talk a little bit about the ILO mandate on labor migration. So the ILO already in its constitution in 1919 recognized labor migration as an important issue. I mean, in the preamble of its constitution, it was indicated that the protection of the interests of workers when employed in countries other of their own was key. So in a way, the ILO has really pioneered the work on labor migration. So the ILO is the custodian of two important conventions on labor migration. One is the Convention for Employment. This is an older convention which was adopted in 1949 at the time when there was, let's say, a process of rapid industrialization in many countries, and there was a need to have migrant workers in order to support this process of rapid industrialization. Then we had the Migrant Workers Convention, which was adopted in 1975. Let's say it was created in a different context at the time of the oil crisis, when actually there was an attempt to address issues related to irregular migration. So it is more focused on one hand, protecting migrant workers' rights, but at the same time addressing irregular migration. And also I want to mention the Labor Statistics Convention, which is also key when it comes to our mandate to work on labor migration statistics, including on labor migration. So I am not going to go through all the documents that I have listed here. I mean, they're all available online, but I think what is important to mention is the International Labour Conference General Discussion on Labour Migration that we had in 2017, where our constituents, government, employers, and worker organizations, they asked the ILO to deepen and broaden its work on labour migration and on labor migration statistics in particular, and also the Global Compact of Migration, which was adopted, which is an intergovernmental agreement which was developed and discussed under the auspices of the UN. Its first objective is actually improving data on international migration. So, I mean, this is just to give you a little bit also the international context and the ILO context within which we deliver technical assistance on labor migration statistics. The ILO work, I mean, already I think some of our main products in the area of labor migration statistics were mentioned. I mean, the global estimates on migrant workers. So there will be a discussion about the methodology and presentation on this later on. Also, the labor migration module in labor force surveys that I mentioned. We have the labor migration database, and of course, our ongoing work with statistical offices all over the world in order to deliver specific technical help when it comes to labor migration. So let's say these are the main areas of work when it comes to labor migration statistics for the ILO. And now, because we are all in this very challenging times of COVID-19, I also wanted to mention a little bit the work that we have been doing at the ILO on COVID-19, but also on labor migration. So what we have developed is a special rapid assessment tool and questionnaire, which could be used again in origin and destination countries in order to measure the situation when it comes to labor migration in this specific context. I mean, for origin countries, this has been a particular interest because there has been a very large number of migrant workers coming back who have lost their jobs. But for origin countries, for destination countries, it has been also very important because they're interested to know what kind of policies could be put in place so that migrant workers are redeployed if they have lost their jobs, or let's say what kind of services could be offered to them, I mean, during these times of crisis. So far, the rapid assessments have been implemented in a number of regional economic communities, and you see the ASEAN, SADC, IGAD, and also in a number of countries. On our website, I think the results of the rapid assessment in the ASEAN region, I think this could be interesting to this audience. They have been already published. I mean, the other are still ongoing. I think what was, let's say, an interesting aspect of the ASEAN assessment was looking into the issue of remigration. So how many of those migrants who went back to their countries intend to remigrate, to go back abroad? So this was quite interesting and quite innovative. So as I said, I mean, the purpose of this rapid assessment is really to help policymakers design more effective policies in these very challenging times. So the questionnaire has been divided also by governments, employers, workers, and also more specifically, we have looked at recruitment practices because, as I said, fair recruitment is one of the topics when it comes to protection of migrant workers, which is, I mean, which the ILO covers in great detail, and with a specific focus on how recruitment costs could be reduced. Now, this is how the structure of the rapid assessment questionnaire looks like. So we have, first you have personal information, then there are some general questions concerning the impact of COVID. And then, as I said, questions for the government authorities, for the social partners, and also for recruitment agencies, and of course, last but not least, for migrant workers as well. So they could give a quite detailed information about the impact of COVID, and of course, this all could be administered online. Okay, so I will stop my presentation here. So now, I mean, I'll try to answer your questions. And also I have put some questions here for discussion just to help our debate. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Popova, for sharing great information. I received 2 questions from the floor. The first question is from Mr. P. Rath from India. So Mr. P. Rath, you can take the floor. Please remember to unmute your audio. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is about the multiple migration. This is something different than the circular migration and return migration. So, suppose a person moves from country A to country B and then stays there for a couple of years. Then after that, he moves from country B to country C. Then that multiple migration scenario, how are we collecting the information if we if we gather the information in country C? Presently, suppose he is in the country C and his original country is A, and in between he has also stayed for certain years in country B. That's the question.
Well, I think this is a very good question, because I think multiple migration is a growing phenomenon, because in general, the spatial patterns of migration have become much more complex. I think in order to trace the movements of such a migrant, I think for the moment we have limited tools. I think it could be, let's say, the information that we could have depends on the data collection in each country in which, he or she has been. But of course, this could provide you, I think, only a partial picture of the movements. And I think this is actually one of the challenges that we are increasingly facing.
May I add, Natalia?
Yes, please, Haki, go ahead.
I think this is, yes, you're right. Just regarding this, as Natalia said, it's an important issue. I think we are first defining who is the international migrant, and this is clear, and it will be even clearer after our having working group meeting in November. But the rest is just, asking more questions about the countries in which this person lived, and duration, and the work about this person. So it's about the history. So, of course, the phenomena may differ from one country to another. Once you identify the problem, I think the issue is the developing relevant questions to collect more information about the history of this person and tabulate accordingly. Thank you.
So the next question is from Nepal, and Mr. Anaraji Tiwari from Nepal can take the floor to ask your question. Mr. Tiwari, are you there?
He needs to be unmuted.
Mr. Tiwari, we can't hear you. Can you turn on your microphone, please?
Okay, thank you. Nepal is badly affected by COVID-19. We started living standard survey, which include consumption and the labor module also. But after 1 month survey period, we stopped our survey due to COVID-19 effect at 23rd of April, and it is still stopped now. Natalia presented that there is rapid assessment tools and questionnaire. I think it will be very helpful to our NSO. So I request her to share that tools and questionnaire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It's not a problem. You could share it. So, yeah. So I took note of your request. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And our third and last question for now is from Youngshim Jung from COSTAT. Ms. Youngshim Jung, you can take the floor and please unmute the audio.
Thank you for Natalia Popova. I am Youngshim Jung and working at International Cooperation Division of Statistics of Korea. Your presentation is very informative to understand RMNS, and then I have a question about your presentation. Will you specify more in detail how NSO of origin countries can measure the positive impact on return migrants to their original country, and which sources or surveys are normally used for this kind of measurement? It will be helpful if you can present some examples. Thank you.
Okay, so basically, when it comes to return migration, so I'm aware of 2 cases where we implemented the ILO migration module, and we included questions on return migration. So it was part of the labor force survey, the regular labor force survey that were implemented in 2013 in Moldova and Ukraine. And the results the results are published on the ILO website, so we could easily share with them. And we obtain information about the socio-demographic characteristics of the return migrants. We obtain information about their history, their employment history, and about their intentions to remigrate. Of course, the challenge is that when the modules that were implemented in these countries, they were quite detailed. So I think this also has an implications on the cost involved. But of course, this information could be collected periodically, and it does indeed provide very important indications. In addition, we have also conducted ad hoc surveys on return migrants, for example, in Moldova. Again, the results are published on the ILO website, where we have, let's say, studied in detail the employment history of migrant workers and their intention to remigrate. So we have done both, surveys, implementing the migration module as part of labor force surveys, but also specific ad hoc questions, let's say, at the request of our constituents to study the phenomena. So this is my experience.
Natalia, can I add one more thing?
Sure, please go ahead.
Yes, and this is very important. ILO, as Natalia said, has been working on this issue, and also ILO is working on the methodologies, and this is also part of the discussion in the ILO's next working group on the labor migration statistics in November. So there are methodologies to measure, and the definition is clear in the guidelines, but the methodologies also will be presented in the ILO's working group, and hopefully will be adopted in the next ICLS. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more questions from the floor. But if you have any comments or questions, we still have a couple of minutes left, so please let me know. If not, I will conclude all the sessions for today here. So thank you, Ms. Popova, and thank you everyone for active discussion. Today we have all 45 participants from 17 countries participating to this meeting despite challenging time schedule. I hope the same enthusiastic participation from you for tomorrow's meeting. Tomorrow, we have sessions about the ILMS questionnaire and data collecting strategy, as well as the outcomes and results of the 2019 ILMS data collection. The meeting will resume at the same time using the same Zoom link as today. We would highly appreciate your being punctual tomorrow. Thank you all very much for joining us today, and hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. You can say bye to each other now.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You all. Thank you,
See
everyone.
you
Thank
tomorrow.
you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.